Well, hi, we're here at NASCC, the Steel Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, and sitting across from me is Frank Russo, founder and president of Russo Structural Services, and he is one of this year's Lifetime Achievement Award winners, being honored for his work in advancing the state-of-the-art in the analysis and design of complex bridge engineering, bridge inspection, forensics, emergency rehab of complex bridge structures, and bridge education, and of course, as well as his service to NSBA. Frank, thank you very much for being here. Congratulations. Yeah, thanks. And congratulations on the award.
Thank you.
What brought you into the world of engineering?
Well, I grew up around it.
Okay.
My father was a civil engineer, a land surveyor, became civil engineer, became bridge engineer, and I sort of grew up around the business. You know, my earliest days as a kid, I remember working with my dad.
Okay.
Right, so it was one of these things that I didn't necessarily know it was exactly what I was going to do, but you know, when sort of push comes to shove and it's time to pick a major, it was civil engineering. It was. And then still, you know, kind of didn't know what it was going to be. I thought I was going to be the guy that did high-rise buildings, you know, sort of aspirational. And then, again, things just sort of evolve, right? It evolves. You wind up working for your dad in the business, and then, you know, it's become a 30-year career in bridges one way or the other.
Okay. So when you got out of school, did you go directly to work for him?
No, I worked for him while I was in college.
Okay, gotcha.
So while I was in college, I was a summer help. I was his first employee at one of the regional offices we opened, and worked for him all through the first 2 years of graduate school as well. And then I moved away, went out to Iowa, got my PhD at Iowa State University, and came back and have been in the private sector since March of 2000.
Okay. And so, I mean, I know you own your own firm now, but and I want to get to that, but you talked a little bit before about your career before that. So after graduate school, then did you start with your own firm right away, or did you have?
No.
Okay.
So I worked full time for the Iowa Department of Transportation.
Oh, okay.
In the Office of Bridges while I got my PhD.
I gotcha.
So that was really a kind of a formative 5 years of education and work at the same time.
Full-time work and a PhD.
Yeah, and had 2 kids along the way as well. It's not really the recipe for how to do it, but somehow we got through.
That's impressive.
Then I went into the private sector. Worked for URS for 4 years. They're now part of AECOM.
Okay.
HNTB for half a dozen years, and then 11 years with Michael Baker. And when I left, I was the National Technical Director of Bridges. Right. And then started my own firm in September 2021.
Okay, gotcha. You know, so I just got to ask, Iowa State, was there a place called the Great Plains Sauce and Dough Company?
Great Plains Sauce and Dough Company on Main Street. Took a certain amount of my money out of my meager paycheck that I earned while I was in school.
Yeah. I went to the University of Iowa, but I've been to Ames a few times, and that was, I think, the first place I ever ate there, and it was pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah. I have to go back at some point. So you were with Michael Baker for, you know, a fair amount of time.
Yeah.
And then, so what prompted you to strike out on your own, so to speak?
Boy, I wish there was a great idea. I wish there was a great story. It was just one of these things that I'd thought about, and I'd thought about for a number of years. And I got to be the ripe old age of 50, and I think my wife got tired of me talking about it, and you know, kind of put it in my head and said, you know, you better just go ahead and do this, right? And there was all the reluctance, of course, as the father and the supporter and all those things of the family, right? You're always reluctant to walk away from a really good job and great people, which is what I had at Michael Baker. You know, an absolutely wonderful group of collaborators and coworkers. But I just decided I was going to try it.
Sure.
And it was either going to work and I'd be successful, or it wasn't going to work and I would go find a job someplace.
Right. Might as well be right. But yeah, you definitely, you didn't want to not try it and regret that.
I didn't want to, as I like to sort of proverbial say, but I actually did. I mean, I'd stand and look in the mirror and sort of have, you know, thoughts and conversations. And I didn't want to be the guy that stood and looked in the mirror and decided against trying it for much longer.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Were there, you know, were there challenges with starting up a brand new company?
Well, sure, right? I mean, the advantages of working for a really large company is that you have people. You have support, right? There are people to handle things. The disadvantage of working for a big company is you get dragged into a whole bunch of things that are sometimes a distraction for the things you want to focus on, right? So now you go on your own, and The pluses and the minuses really all of your own doing, right?
Sure.
The successes and the failures, the same guy in the mirror is responsible for both of them.
Right. Yeah, I talked to somebody once who had bought a coffee shop or started their own coffee shop, and they said, at the beginning, the best part about it is like, oh, look, I own my own coffee shop. This is what I want to be doing. And then they said the worst part of it is, oh, right, I have to wash all these dishes and I have to be here all the time.
Yeah, I have to clean the bathroom. I have to mop the floor, right? Like you're responsible for all of it, right? So
yeah.
But it's not like that was a surprise, right? I knew that going in.
Mm-hmm. Of course, right. No, that's good. Well, and also you didn't try to start it right out of college. You started it with life experience.
50 years old, right?
There you go, right. So, throughout your career, whether it's at your own firm or at Michael Baker, I'm just curious. Do you have? I'm sure you've got countless projects, but is there? Do you have one that comes to mind right away that was that stands out as far as being a particularly good lesson, scary or otherwise?
Well, I have a few of them, and I guess I'll probably link them maybe to the Lifetime Achievement Award and some of the words that you spoke earlier, right? Sort of being honored for a career that has some achievements in emergency response and forensics and rehabilitation. So, whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, right? I've had the chance with my colleagues at Michael Baker over those 11 years to participate in a number of major steel bridge rehabilitation, repair, and emergency response projects. These include the emergency response and rehabilitation of the Sherman-Minton Bridge, which carries I-64 over the Ohio River in Louisville. Right?
Okay.
That was our sort of first major response. That was back in about 2011, I want to say.
Okay. Yep.
Then spent about a year and a half rehabilitating the Hohen Bridge in Milwaukee. And the Hohen Bridge in Milwaukee is famous for a near collapse. Back around the year 2000. Now, we weren't involved in that piece of it, but we were involved in the major rehabilitation, and I led the major rehabilitation design of a couple of miles of all steel structure.
Okay.
Right along the waterfront of Milwaukee, right across the Summerfest property, which interestingly was one of the Ideas Award winners this year, right?
Yes, the main stage they raised. They literally raised the roof. Yes, that one.
They raised the roof on Summerfest. So Summerfest is right next to that big bridge that looms overhead at Summerfest.
Oh yeah, I know that bridge very well.
Part of my work.
Okay. Wow.
And then was involved in the emergency rehabilitation of the Delaware River Bridge for the Pennsylvania-New Jersey Turnpike, and then my last major project before leaving Michael Baker was the emergency response and rehabilitation of the Hernando de Soto Bridge, which crosses the Mississippi in Memphis. So,
right.
Every one of those projects was, taking a very important and critical lifeline steel structure that's essential to our communities nationwide, and demonstrating that we could either fix a problem or we could rehabilitate an existing structure to get many decades of future service life out of what are otherwise good structures in good shape.
Yeah. Well, the common thread through there, of course, is rehabilitation. How did you get into that side of bridge design?
It just comes to you, right? I mean, the phone call comes and somebody needs some support. So at that moment, you don't decide that, I'd really rather be designing this other thing that might go on the cover of Engineering News Record someday.
Right.
Or grace the pages of modern steel construction. I mean, our job as engineers is to be a steward of the taxpayers' dollars, at least in the part of the business that I work in, right? The transportation business. My ethics, my own responsibility is to be responsible to your money, right? And
that's a good way of putting it.
And that means, and it's my own money, right?
Sure.
I look at it like, is this how I want to be spending my own money, my children's money, my friends and family's money? And very commonly it comes down to that a really smart rehabilitation may be the most expedient thing to do. So just sort of gravitated towards fixing and extending the service life of existing bridges.
Right, and especially when we're talking about bridges as compared to buildings. I mean, and say specifically sports venues.
Right.
Obviously those are built ideally with private money, but yeah, I mean, you'll find a perfectly good football stadium that they'll say, oh, we don't like that one anymore. It's only 30 years old, but let's build a new one right next to it. But when it comes to bridges, yeah, I mean, we really there's more of a push to say, let's save it at all costs.
Yeah. Well, in my home city, Philadelphia, every stadium that I remember as a kid is gone.
Oh my gosh,
Right?
yeah, you're right.
It's
That's
only
true.
remembered as photos, right? Where the
Right.
Phillies and the Eagles played at Veterans Stadium is gone. The Flyers and Sixers played at the Spectrum is gone. But all of the infrastructure is still there.
Right, right. And now you're making me wonder, because I've very limited experience with Philadelphia. Were they all built basically in the same areas or like
They were
next
across
door?
the street from each other.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
They were across the street from each other and built in the late 60s and early 70s to co-locate all the teams. Now, the current stadiums are all basically across the street from the old stadiums. They built new buildings on old parking lots and kind of flip-flop the uses around, but everything is still basically in the same place.
Yeah, and in Chicago, where I live, they took, I think it was the old Chicago Stadium, they built the United Center across the street, and then the old White Sox, Comiskey Park, they built the new one across the street. Right. And Wrigley is
will always be
100-something years old at this point, and at this, I'm gonna guess will always be. Well, that's excellent to hear. Getting back quickly to like inspection, rehabilitation. I'm guessing you're starting to see more drones when it comes to that kind of work.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely been a focus. I would probably say of increased attention over, I don't know, let's call it the past 5 years or so, right? It started out as, well, it's cute, let's try it.
Right.
And now what you really find is I think people are under the impression that a human being won't go inspect a bridge, that somebody will just go out there and fly something around and take some pictures. And that's really not the way it goes, right? Because our federal requirements that govern our inspection program really aren't set up to allow for a robot, a drone, to whatever, go out and do it. But they become really valuable assistants to the human beings that are doing the inspections, right? So, the way that the technology might be integrated into an inspection right now may be that the drone goes out with the inspectors every 2 years and captures footage, captures pictures, and that can sort of be used for archival and for tracking the change of conditions over time. Yeah. It's also used on really large structures to first get good eyeballs on the areas of the bridge that really need the inspector's attention, because you're not likely going to crawl every inch of it if you don't have to.
Yeah, right.
Right, so you sort of catch it with the drone, and then the inspector knows, okay, I have to go to this location and this cable and this location on the truss, and put some hands on it and really figure out what's going on.
Yeah, not so much a replacement of the inspection, but just a supplement.
Yeah, it becomes augmented, right? I mentioned earlier, I grew up, with my dad in the business, right? And I remember many, many years ago, he and I talking about something, and he pointed to a hammer. And he said to me at the time, Frankie, what is that? And I said, well, it's a hammer. And he says, it's not a carpenter, right? I said, no, it's a hammer. He says, okay, then don't ever confuse the computer with the engineer.
Oh,
and the same could be said of maybe the drone, right? Let's not assume that one is a replacement for the other. One becomes a tool that allows the other one to be more effective.
Sure. No, very good point. I want to talk a little bit about Philadelphia now.
Okay.
So you're from there. You're born and raised, lived your whole life except for
a half dozen years in
Iowa.
Scenic and sunny Ames, Iowa.
As somebody who lived in Iowa City, we always kind of poke fun at Ames, but Ames is actually really nice. I liked it. So as a native, what do you? I don't know if I want to say what is a best kept secret, but for somebody who's going to visit, what would you suggest they do?
So I'd suggest
a must-see.
Okay, you're going to need. I tell everybody you need 3 solid days.
Okay.
Right? Don't assume that your travel day you're going to get much done, because we know that you don't get much done in the travel day, right? But you need 3 or 4 solid days in the city. Excellent collection of museums, all of the historic things, right? You're going to find the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall, and Betsy Ross's house, right? And every one of those things is going to consume a little bit of time. If you have kids, we have the nation's first zoo. So the Philadelphia Zoo is absolutely terrific. If you are an art lover, there are multiple outstanding art museums that are all kind of clustered together on Ben Franklin Parkway. You can run up the steps and jump up and down just like Rocky.
I did.
Because you will see hundreds of people do it every day on the steps of the art museum. But book a few solid days, and the good news is you won't need a car.
Yeah.
So from the airport, just get yourself a hotel downtown, bring some good sneakers, and just walk around. Right, everything that you'll want to see in the historic old city is within 5 or 10 minutes of each other because it's the remnants of a colonial city that at the time was only several blocks wide and long.
Right, right. And I know that the City Hall is a very imposing, impressive building right there in the middle of everything.
It is, yeah. Holds world records until today for things like largest unreinforced masonry tower, which is really nerdy engineering stuff since we are on a civil engineering discussion right now.
Right, right. No, I mean, I would say about 100% of everybody listening to this would appreciate that, that fact.
We'll classify.
Yeah. No, when I was there, I did see the Liberty Bell and I did the Rocky thing. And I also remember seeing, I think it was the oldest bar in the city. And I can't remember what it was called, but it was down a little alley downtown.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was the one that had the first liquor license or something.
McGillen's Ale House.
Something like, yes, yeah, that was the one.
Not that I've been, but I've heard.
Yeah, not that I'd been either, but yes, yeah, I was there for a little while. No, it's a great place. Okay, so I've asked this of everybody I've ever met from Philadelphia. Pat's, Geno's, or neither?
Neither.
Okay, that's what I've heard from so many natives.
Neither. Okay. I hope nobody from Pat's and Geno's will ever see this, but we don't go there.
Okay.
I'm not sure who does. I think it's the tourists.
Sure.
And I'm sure there are some locals that swear by them, but neither would make my top 10.
Okay. But are you saying you don't eat cheesesteaks, or you just would say you have a favorite?
I can't say I'm not going to eat cheesesteaks, but the favorite's the other place. But the hidden gem in Philadelphia is the roast pork sandwich.
Oh,
so when you come back, we'll get that checked off of your list.
Absolutely, that I can't say no to that.
We'll get you the roast pork sandwich with sharp provolone and either spinach or broccoli rabe. It's your choice. But the cheesesteak is interesting, but the hidden gem is the roast pork.
Roast pork, okay. And we were talking about scrapple earlier too.
Okay.
So I had a vague idea of what scrapple was. Can you please describe scrapple?
Well, there's only so much you want to say because as you sort of dig into how it's made, it probably becomes less appealing. But scrapple is let's best describe it as a meat product, right? It is
a meat-like product.
It's meat-like, but it's ground up meat. Right, it's typically beef or combinations of beef and pork. Cornmeal is a binder, other spices, cooked, pressed into a loaf. You buy it at the grocery store. You're going to take it home and slice off a big chunk of it and just pan fry it.
Okay.
And it is a breakfast accompaniment in the way that sausage and bacon is. It's kind of an Amish sort of Lancaster County originated product in Pennsylvania. That all being, say, an hour or so west of Philadelphia, but it's a delicacy. It's a local favorite, and it's one of those things. Once you leave the region, you can't find it.
Yeah, no, I've heard of it here and there, but yeah, I can't say I've ever actually had it. So that's another one I'll add to the list when I go to Philadelphia. All right. Well, Frank, really great talking to you. Thanks so much again.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations on the award.
Thanks, I appreciate it.